Today's gonna be a little bit new. We're probably just gonna have some conversational uh information between Chris and I. He can interrupt me. I, probably may not interrupt him. We'll see. But today we're going to be talking about computer hygiene, social engineering, what it is, VPNs, passwords, password management, MFA, why it's so important, and what HTTPS is. So, Chris, who are you? What do you do?
I am a real person. I am not an AI generated machine. I'm a pen
Yet.
tester at Black Hills Information Security. I have my own organization, Ridgeback InfoSec, which exists solely to create the very next bullet of anti-siphon classes. I've got two out there: Intro to Offensive Tooling and Advanced Offensive Tooling. Um, Handful of certifications out there, just so people know I'm certified as something. I don't know what I'm certified as. Um, and yeah, I do other things. I've done a handful of these webcasts here, occasionally on the Anti-Cast that's on Wednesdays as well, which is good to check out. And I guess I do other things.
Did you
Yes,
own a
I'm so.
Ridgeback dog and that's why you came up with that name?
What's that?
Like a Norwegian Ridgeback? Did you own?
I have a Rhodesian Ridgeback dog now. I had two.
Okay.
We
Oh
only
my
have one
gosh.
now. But yeah, that's where that company name comes from for Ridgeback InfoSec, and that's what that little icon is down at the bottom right there. That icon was actually generated using a
AI?
Chat GPT plugin
Mm.
thing to give me a whole bunch of options.
Well, look at you
Yeah, just using it to create that. And yes,
being
to
efficient.
Coyote in the chat, Ridgebacks are great dogs. They are
I
the
know
best dog.
that's why I asked because I was going to be a little jealous. I think they're gorgeous. So, anyway, about me. I am also a pen tester at BHAS. I also manage adversarial simulation for our SOC clients. I have a total of 15 years of experience in IT and 10 in cybersecurity, but yet still jokingly call myself a junior pen tester. One of our coworkers created this little AI generated art for me. And I love it so much. I threw it into this slide. I have taught various
It
courses
was
like
me.
it was you because you're awesome. Um, I've taught attack surface management, cloud hacking, other cybersecurity basics classes to a variety of different audiences, from people that are going to college for this type of stuff, hacking, things like that. Also to our local community, Girl Scout groups, you name it. Anyone that comes to me, I'm like, oh yeah, I'd love to talk about this stuff. Let's go. So I have an English Mastiff named Waffles. I dropped his picture into the pet pics. He is the biggest, derpiest dog you will ever meet in your entire life. He has 3 brain cells all fighting for first place. It is wonderful time. All right. So, first slide, computer hygiene. What do we think about when we talk about computer hygiene? It's, probably cleaning your computer, right? I guess AI can do that for us now. But computer hygiene, what is it? Why do we want it? And specifically data backup. I have this question asked of me so many times. Every single week, it feels like. I dropped my computer into a river. What do I do? Well, do you have a backup? That's the first question that I ask them. And 9 times out of 10, they say no. And I'm like, all right, cool. Well, good luck to you, my friend. Or ransomware attack. Do I pay the ransom? Do you have a data backup? There's so many different reasons to have data backups, and it's super important to have a data backup so that if you have a ransomware attack, or, I put myself through college doing computer repair. We also did a variety of malware removal for computers, and the number of people that I saw come in with that FBI splash page on their computer screen, and it said something like, you need to pay us like $50 of, back then Bitcoin wasn't as much. I'm aging myself a little bit, but back then, 1 Bitcoin and your ransomware attack is gone. But there's no guarantee that the ransomware attack would decrypt whatever information was on your computer. And so the number one thing that we talked about, yeah, Amazon gift cards, someone just said in Discord, the number one thing that we talked about with these clients is data backups. If you have a data backup, just wipe your computer. You can just restore from your backup, and then you don't have to worry about paying this ransomware. And this is very important for like personal computers. Obviously for an enterprise, my answer is going to be a little bit different, based upon how, mature the attack is and how widespread it is. Now, obviously you'll want to contact your local law enforcement to get a better answer on whether or not to pay that ransomware, and your lawyers. So, not advising you to do anything your lawyers are going to say something different about. Anyway, moving on. Important information data should be in multiple backups. Why? Because if you have an external hard drive and that hard drive crashes, which they do, you can have an online backup. Or you can, for example, I'm a photographer. I love doing photography on the side. All of my pictures are backed up in multiple places. I have a cloud backup. I have an external hard drive. My pictures are saved to. I also have another cloud storage facility that I use to back up my pictures, because it is super important to me that I don't lose those things if my external hard drive fails. If for whatever reason that cloud organization goes bankrupt, what happens to all of the stuff that's there? I want to have multiple backups. I personally advise that we have at least one physical backup and one online backup, because I wear a tinfoil hat all the time, and like to have various backups. And also someone just said in chat, RAID is not a backup. That is super correct. If you have a RAID setup, that is one backup. Highly recommend having another second physical backup and or moving it into the cloud. Frequency. Ideally, you want to do that daily. Ideally, you do it every single time you change your file. But obviously that is not feasible for the vast majority of us. Less ideal, weekly, monthly. If you have one backup and you're basing it off of that, then that's better than nothing, right? And then we're going to talk about automation, so automating those backups so that you don't have to think about it. You don't have to rely on a physical process, or, you're going into your software to back up manually. Automation will do it for you, and then it's easier to get to that ideal of doing it daily or weekly. There are lots of cloud-based offerings out there. Mac Time Machine will back it up to the iCloud for you. Windows, OneDrive, Office 365, and then you have various third-party services that you have to pay for. You have to pay for iCloud as well if you use more than a certain amount of data, but it's typically nothing more than like $5 to $10 a month. And honestly, $5 to $10 a month versus losing my precious pictures or my taxes or things like that, I would much rather pay for that $5 to $10 a month to use the third-party service to back up my data than losing it all together and having to track all that information back down, or just having it be gone, period. So, and with that being said too, super important, Chris is going to talk about this later, protecting those backups with MFA. Because, if that stuff has important information in it and it gets breached, you want to have more protection. Or if your account gets breached, or if your credentials get breached, you want to have more protection on those accounts so that you don't have easy access to all of your data. And again, also another reason why I recommend having a physical backup, just so that if it does get breached and your data is gone for whatever reason, you have that physical backup. Second topic, computer hygiene. Software updates. This is probably one of the most common finding that we have on pen tests is software updates, unsupported software, things of that nature. Why it's super important. One, it fixes security vulnerabilities, exploits that are out there like Eternal Blue. MS0867 back in the day. That was a really fun exploit that almost guaranteed to get you access to a computer. Software updates fix all of those problems. You have unsupported systems that sit out there. And why are unsupported systems such a big problem? Well, because they're unsupported from the vendor. First of all, if some new 0-day pops out on that system, it's less likely to be updated by the vendor, because they're just going to say, you're using, Windows 7. Why are you using Windows 7? You really should be using Windows 10, which is probably going to be obsolete here soon too anyway, but I digress. Software updates are super important. Frequency, ideally for me, I say to do them automatically. Again, if you have a personal machine, automatic is less likely to cause problems. However, for organizations, you're going to want to vet those updates first in some sort of dev environment. And then if the update doesn't break everything, then you can roll it out to your entire organization, which is also another reason why we write this up, is because most of the time organizations are vetting those updates first before they push them out to production. Less ideally for personal computers is monthly, or manually. You're manually updating all of your software. I don't really consider that to be ideal, mostly from the perspective, again, that you're relying on yourself to remember to not dismiss those like little nudges from the software programs themselves. And then forgetting, and more time passes, and then more updates get, kind of domino affected. The last thing to be careful of, and this is more from like the social engineering perspective of like software updates, is to be aware of where those software updates are supposedly coming from. If you see an email that says, hey, you have an update that you have to complete, most likely it's not true. If it's coming from, like, for example, Microsoft pops up and you load up like Microsoft Word and it says, hey, you have an update to install. 9 times out of 10, that's probably trustworthy, but you need to trust, or you need to see who the publisher of the update is. And then, if that's a trusted person or a trusted third party, you can push that update. But again, you want to trust but verify type of thing is what I'm saying, is be aware of where those updates are coming from. Don't just click on things that say you need to update something, but just make sure that it's coming from the actual vendor of that software. So, yeah, no software publisher is going to send an email saying you're missing an update. Not going to happen. As far as computer hygiene, antivirus, anti-malware options, I only listed probably like the vetted free options here. There are so many options out there for paid versions and things that cost like $60 to $90 a year. Vast majority of us that are using personal machines don't want to pay $90 a year for our AV and anti-malware options. So the stuff that is here, Clam AV, Malwarebytes, Windows Defender, those things are trusted. They've been around for a really, really long time. Malwarebytes has been around for, 10 plus years. It is kind of like a go-to of mine. When I worked, again, back in this little help desk in college, Malwarebytes was the number one tool that we ran on computers to get rid of viruses and malware off of them. Windows Defender has come a super long way from where it used to be. From where it used to be kind of useless. No offense, Microsoft, don't hate me on that one, but it was not great. Now, Windows Defender is catching things for once, and it is actually doing a good job of sanitizing systems from viruses. So if you don't have it enabled on your local machine, and you don't have a good reason to not have it enabled, really, I recommend enabling it. For the Mac side of things, there's a little bit less options. We're talking about Little Snitch. Little Snitch is great. It's kind of painful to set up, though, especially if you have your firewall enabled on your Mac. You're going to be, when you navigate to things for the first time, you're going to be continuously saying, okay, this is an allowed trusted site, or this is an allowed trusted program, because it's going to try and block everything. So that's the painful part of it. And I would say it's not really great for newbies. AVG also really good. A great option, free, mostly just for Mac though, obviously. Frequency of scans. Again, weekly is okay. Ideally, I would say daily. Now, there are some people that are like, okay, well, what about your hard drive? If we're doing weekly, daily scans of our hard drive, is that going to shorten the lifespan of your hard drive? Not really, not necessarily, especially where now almost all computers have solid state drives that are, in my opinion, tougher than, just a regular hard drive. You're not going to be seeing those problems. As far as like other file system hygiene things, we have Windows System File Checker. If you're noticing that your computer's running slow, or you're experiencing like blue screens of death or other things of that nature, I don't want to be your tech support, but if you haven't done a Windows System File Checker on your Windows system, I highly recommend it. It'll scan it for corrupted files and fix them. On the Mac side of things, I do have a reference to the Mac. It's like the file recovery system, how to get into it and how to scan your system for corrupted files and then fix them. All right. Any questions about hygiene before I move on to social engineering? I don't see anything in Discord. Oh, Smithy asked, no McAfee or Norton. The reason why I didn't mention those things is because really to get the best effectiveness out of them, you have to pay for them. And I am not about that pay for life. So I like free things.
Try to keep it free wherever you can. Right?
Yeah, ad blockers.
For broad adoption, since this is kind of like, basics, we're gearing this towards people who are just trying to get that first bit of security online and at home and things like that. And those free things are good.
Yeah, and like someone else mentioned, they're not that great. They're resource intensive, and there's so many other paid for options that are better than them. I feel like the reason why they're so well known is because they've been around for one, a super long time, and two, enterprise security people love them for some reason and love to deploy them, maybe just because of how easy it used to be, and they just have never ventured away from it. I never really understood why it saturates the market so much, but again, I'm not a salesperson and I don't manage enterprise security anywhere, so I'm not going to speak to that point.
Now, if you are in the position where you're if you're here and you're listening to this recording and you are in the position where you are configuring agents in an enterprise environment to do antivirus or anything like that, please, dear God, look into an option to limit the resources that the scan can consume. Because I've been in organizations and I've had family that have been in organizations where their machine becomes entirely unusable for no joke, like half a day, because some admin didn't restrict the scanning resources that it could consume, and it eats up all the IO of the drive and all the CPU, and it locks up the machine completely. And a reboot doesn't do anything because it's just going to say scan was not completed. I'm just going to
restart. You could tell how long it's been since I've been in an organization that gave me a computer like that.
I'm not going to call out any agency directly, but government, I'm looking at you. You already provision underpowered machines to most of your people. Just limit how much. I don't care if the scan takes longer. Just let the machine still be usable while it scans. That's all.
Schedule it to run off hours. Yeah. You can schedule business hours in those agents and schedule it to run off those business hours. And then just tell your people, hey, you could lock your computer, but leave it open and it'll run. So anywho, offer a soapbox there.
There was some scarring there. I had to share. I have a platform I want to educate. Please.
But again, to your point, this is a conversation. It has been how many years for me? Probably 8+ years since I've had a computer that is managed by enterprise security, because by nature, as pen testers, we can't use those computers to do testing off of because it'll just block pretty much everything that we're trying to do. So for us, we forget about these things because we're just not doing it every single day.
There was somebody mentioned in the Discord a few minutes ago about their antivirus keeps deleting and eating all the malware they're intentionally downloading. I was pen testing on an internal pen test at an organization, and every time we would download a pen testing tool, it would get isolated and destroyed. And we went to the enterprise management group and like, you can't do this. And like, yeah, we can. it's what we're doing. It's an attacker tool. Like, yeah, but we're attackers, like
Yeah.
for the good of it. And they're like, you can use these 5 tools. I was like, doesn't even scratch the surface of what we should be doing, but a whole nother conversation.
Soapbox. Yeah, we could probably fill up hours on a soapbox. So back to the slide that is showing on screen. These images, these wonderful, lovely images were created by AI. I love how they progressively get more confused looking. So I just thought it was even more appropriate for social engineering. I am probably one of the 5 or 6 people that does social engineering at BHAS. So if you hear my voice ever, run. If I'm calling you, run. Kidding, mostly. But social engineering, we're going to talk about 3 different aspects of it. Now, there's a link that I put in a resource slide later that talks about 6 different types of phishing or social engineering, and they go way more into depth into the different types. Obviously, there are going to be subtopics under each different type of social engineering, but I'm just going to hit these 3 major ones. So we have smishing. Smishing is when you get a text message trying to coerce you into doing something. Vishing is when I call you and I try to coerce you into doing something. Phishing is when you get an email that says, hey, you need to update your software, and then it has a download that you have to execute in order to update whatever it's trying to convince you to update. And 9 times out of 10, it's going to open some type of command and control on your computer and call home to wherever that home is. The reason why I wanted to talk about it here in this class or in this webinar is because social engineering is becoming one of the number 1 vectors into businesses. When we have red teams and we have clients that come to us and say, hey, we want to social engineer our help desk, vast majority of the time, the way that we get in is through social engineering. And that's because we're looking into what is available for certain victims through something called OSINT. And so OSINT is open source intelligence. It's what I can gain and information about a person from Googling you or from data breaches. We do have a treasure trove of data breach information that we can look through to find people's information. Mine's probably in there too, unfortunately. It's just the beast of being online. But for example, one of the biggest data breaches is the LinkedIn one, right? Where LinkedIn got breached and all of that information got dumped into, the internet. And everyone had their addresses on it, their phone numbers, their emails, their names, their places of business. All of that information is there. And so when I'm going to go do or set up a phishing phone call scheme and I'm trying to find victims, I'm going to look for people that have that information so that I can then go call the help desk and say, hey, I lost my phone. I need to reset my MFA. And this actually just happened with a client a couple weeks ago where I called the help desk and I posed as a person and I had a bunch of their information. I had enough information about this specific person to then go pull a background check with permission from my client, of course. But I had enough information to go pull that background check. And then, at that point, it's kind of game over. And I don't mean to say this in like a mean way. It's just, again, the beast of the nature of being online, of having our information out there. Unfortunately, this stuff happens. And so in order to protect yourself and your organization from these type of social engineering attacks, you have to be extraordinarily vigilant. And those policies and procedures that are in place for a reason. And so with this particular client, when I called and I said, hey, I lost my phone, I need to reset my MFA. I need to reset my password because my password was also on my phone because I was pretending to be a vendor. And as a vendor, I was like jokingly told the help desk, I was like, as a vendor, I have so many clients, I just can't remember all of their passwords. And I used a password manager, but it was on my phone and my phone is gone. And so I don't know my password or my login and I don't have my MFA. And then it got to the point where I was able to convince them that I was saying who I was, to the point where they added my personal cell phone number and a fake email and emailed me the QR code for the MFA setup. Super bad situation where I was able to compromise this person's account and gain access to their VPN. Now, protecting yourself against those things, how would you do something like that? How would you identify when this person is saying, hey, I'm so and so, I have all of their personal information? Where should this attack have stopped, right? This attack should have stopped at the point where the person is saying, I need you to add my personal cell phone number and this email address. At no point should that attack have gone any further. Red flags should have been raised and it should have just stopped right there, right? The person that was on the help desk should have advised me to reach out to my point of contact with the company and say, I need to have my information updated. That's where that should have stopped. We should have said, I'm sorry, we can't help you. However, in situations like this, unfortunately, it's following the script is not always what happens, right? So with that particular vishing attack, I was successful. We've had a number of situations where things like that are super successful. Or, for example, getting into a more technical type of social engineering attack, but I want to talk about it because while it's not really mentioned here, it's still a type of social engineering. MS Teams. If you don't have your Microsoft Teams configured correctly, there is the potential that an outsider can message your personal people inside of the MS Teams and pretend to be from, an outside entity. But how many times are you paying attention to see who is messaging you on Teams and see where they're messaging you from? So if you message enough people, chances are one of them might actually do what you're trying to coerce them to do. So again, another phishing attack, not exactly fitting under smishing, vishing, or phishing. Say that 10 times fast, right? But yeah, it doesn't really fit into that niche, but it's still a type of social engineering attack. So protecting yourselves from these different type of smishing, vishing, and phishing attacks is complicated, but also easy in the same sense, right? Smishing, text messages. How do we protect ourselves from these things? And what are general kind of common spam phishing ruses that we've seen out there? Now, these pictures are from my personal account, so I've sanitized them a little bit. When I was making this presentation, I actually got these while I was making the presentation. I was like, oh my gosh, this is great. I can put this in here and talk about them as an example of, kind of phishing is getting a little bit more advanced, right? There's no spelling errors in this particular one, but it is obviously a fish, right? I remember back in my day when phishing was so obvious to point out because there were so many spelling grammatical errors. There was, it was very obvious that the logo wasn't correct. Things like that were super blatantly obvious. So smishing in particular is when you get that text message, right? So you're going to want to look at the sender. Who is the sender on a smishing text message? You can look up, reverse phone number lookups and see where the phone number is coming from. And if it's like a VoIP, for example, VoIPs are 9 times out of 10 in my example or my situation when I get a smishing text message. If it's a VoIP number, I just ignore it. Or you can even go as far as to report that phone number as being used as spam or scamming to the vendor that hosts the VoIP phone number. But for this example, this was a phish message that I received with a PH. And so this came to my personal iCloud account. And so support Spotify, the first thing that we notice here that's wrong is why is there an emoji in their first and last name? Excuse me. Most of the time, you're going to get a message from Spotify and there's not going to be an emoji in an official Spotify email. It's just not going to happen. So that was indicator number 1 for me. Indicator number 2 for me is it's threatening to permanently suspend my account if I don't make a payment in 48 hours. Okay. if this was a legitimate message from Spotify, what would I actually do? Okay, I'm going to go to Google and I'm going to Google for Spotify, or I'm going to go to spotify.com and I'm going to go check my payment information at Spotify's website. I'm not going to click on this link. And I don't advise anyone to ever click on links in emails unless it's from a trusted person that you know is going to send you an email. For example, again, BHIS, we have certain vendors and we're switching from vendor to vendor sometimes. And so we will sometimes be warned that we're going to be switching from vendor to vendor so that we know that, it's probably a legitimate email. If that's happening and your company is saying, hey, we're going to switch to this new vendor, chances are you could probably trust that email, but verify. Okay, so how do we verify? There is, in the upper right-hand corner of this email, you see the details. And so that is going to give you the details of where this email is coming from and your email headers. And so who is this email coming from? It's claiming to be Spotify, but the email is support@helloice.com. Helloice.com is not Spotify. And I don't know what they're thinking, but I'm not going to be replying or clicking on anything in this link because this is obviously not Spotify. Now, the other thing that we can do is we can go look at these email headers. And so I looked at these email headers, and this was received by flywheelsites.com, which is a known WordPress vendor that hosts WordPress sites. Now, I did a little bit more research on this because I'm a little petty sometimes, and I like to fall down rabbit holes. But for this particular thing, it appeared to be a Flywheel Sites website that was helloice.com, was a WordPress site that was hosted on flywheelsites.com. So then I booted up a VM and I went into the virtual machine and I loaded helloice.com, and it popped up with login credentials they were hoping to get me to log in or someone to log in, whoever had set up this website. Didn't actually go the full length to put a working website in place, and they hid what was ever behind it on credentials. And so that's kind of where I stopped because there was nothing else there. I reported them to flywheelsites.com for spam and phishing, and then went on my day. So now we're going to talk about smishing and phishing. The two things that I said here: be careful of VoIP. It is one of the biggest problems right now is VoIP phone calls and VoIP numbers being used for phishing and trying to social engineer people into doing things. And the biggest reason why is it's easy, it's available, and it's cheap. These people that are trying to gain access to your information are trying to find the easy way in and the cheapest way in. And so VoIP is the biggest way to do that. The other way is to do oh gosh, the word just totally escaped from me, Chris, where they spoof. There we go. When they spoof.
I was just unmuting to try to say that.
Yeah. I was like, oh my gosh, Ashley.
I muted my mic.
So spoofing. So spoofing is where you pretend to be a phone number that you're not, or pretend to be an email that you're not. That does happen. And that's why I also say to look up those email headers, is to look and see what path that email is taking. If it's pretending to be Spotify and it says support@spotify.com, but it's coming from @helloice.com, chances are it's not support@spotify.com. It's someone from HelloIce trying to send you an email pretending to be Spotify support. So, again, you're looking at those, who is calling, right? And so I get a lot of junk. I've had my cell phone number, my personal cell phone number for, 20 years now. And the amount of junk that I get to my personal cell phone is absolutely ridiculous. But I get a lot of spoofing phone calls, a lot of spoofing text messages, especially around election season. The spoofing goes like through the roof. But a lot of them are vendors trying to pose as Medicare, or trying to pose as the Social Security Administration, saying that my Social Security number has been compromised and I need to do something to reset it or something, or it's going to get locked. those are the biggest scams that I get personally is someone trying to scam me through Medicare or someone trying to scam me through my social security number or occasionally I'll get the computer support one where they're trying to say, oh, my computer's been compromised, but that one seems to be less and less, especially as awareness has become more prevalent on those different type of ruses for the smishing and the vishing. But when you have a spoofed phone call, it's really hard to tell that it's not who they say it is. I remember probably about 10 years ago before I had kids, someone had called me and was pretending to be my child and was pretending to say something along the lines of they had been in a car accident and they were at the hospital and they needed money to pay for the copay. And I was like, I'm sorry, I don't have any children. But, they were trying to get money out of me, and they were trying to say, "Oh, I need a gift card for you to send me this gift card information so that I can pay for this copay." Um, for some people that may work, for grandparents that may work if they don't, you know what signs to stop and look for, or if they're getting a text message from who they believe is their grandchild, and the grandchild is saying, "Oh my gosh, I'm stuck somewhere. I need your help, grandma. Um, please help me. I need to get out of this situation, this bad situation, whatever that situation is." I do see that happen. And so that's another smishing and vishing situation to be aware of and to look out for is the one where they're posing to be a family member and they're really not. It is successful because it's preying on your humanity, right? And it's looking to say, hey, I'm in trouble. You love me, right? Please pay for whatever it is that I'm asking for so I can get out of trouble. Um, Most of the time, those are either spoofing, who they're pretending to be, and that's super easy to verify, right? You just call the person. You call that person back and you say, "Hey, I got a text message from you saying that you're in trouble. Are you really in trouble? Can you tell me more?" Or if you can't get a hold of that person, call their parent or their sister or, go through other methods, email them, text message them. Those things, when you're spoofing a phone number, it's not going to come back to the person spoofing it. It's not. So that's how you can trust those or verify those. Any question? Yes,
So
Jason just said set up code words for calls because of AI voice cloning. Another good point. Was that what you were just going to say, Chris?
no, that's really good. That's a really good thing to set up with your family is code words. It's one of those things that you learn in like the Boy Scouts or the
Right.
Cub Scouts or Wolf Scouts or whatever scouts you're in is setting up these kind of very simple protections for your home and for your family is code words that you can say on the phone, scenarios, things like that to identify it's them and identify whether or not they're in issues. And I think Ashley was saying this over and over again, but I think it warrants calling it out even directly. Is that all of these types of attacks or smishing, vishing, phishing, all of them are boiled down to it's a con. And cons have a few things like dictators, cons have a few things that are consistent. They try to create consequences if you don't act, and they try to create a sense of urgency for you to act. So the examples that
Mhm.
Ashley threw up there in the screenshots was your account's going to be deactivated if you don't get back to us immediately, right?
Right.
They're trying to play on that fear. And so often that succeeds in older generations because they don't understand what's at risk or how to verify things like Ashley was talking about in examples. And there was one other Q&A question that came in discussion over the Zoom that I want to call out is that somebody mentioned that if their help desk falls for these phishing attacks, they're fired. Um, I'm going to echo sentiments that many people on Black Hills have said before. Is that and somebody replied to the question or the conversation in the chat is that punishing an individual for failing without first attempting to educate them is a very bad environment to be in. And if I would see that as a practice to another department or to another team, I would, from another team, another department, know that that same sort of mentality would be applied towards me no matter what other type of situation there is. Zero compassion, zero education, termination, with no with no attempt to become better as an for the individual or for the organization is a problem. And if a help desk has full authority to be able to create a situation where a phishing attack or a social engineering attack can reach its full fruition, you have a problem with your organization and your process and their authority to act, not that help desk person whose whole purpose is to try to be helpful. Right. So I just want to call out those couple things, but really good stuff, Ashley. Yeah.
Yeah.
And good questions and conversations in Discord too.
You're spot on. And one of the things that I do, again, especially because I do these social engineering attacks, is I attempt to sanitize as much as possible so that, one, that person doesn't get in trouble, because it's not their fault necessarily that they're failing, right? Mm-hmm. Policies and procedures may allow for the fruition of that social engineering attack. And on the other flip side of the coin, if one person is falling for it, it doesn't mean that everyone else at the help desk wouldn't fall for it. You know, it very well could be that that person was just unfortunately patient zero, right? And that the rest of the help desk would have also fallen for that trick. And in this particular situation, I called back 2 days in a row. And so it was multiple help desk people pointing out that policies and procedures are either, one, not being followed and the help desk is not trained adequately, and or policies and procedures need to be fixed. Mm-hmm. So this resource slide is kind of high-level overview, different things, phishing scams, different types of phishing attacks, backing up your Windows PC, Mac backup information, how to, fix corrupted system files and identify them from both the Windows side of things and the Mac side of things. Now, obviously, if you don't trust these links, don't trust them, don't have to trust them. One of the things that you can do is when you hover over the link with your mouse, it will tell you where the link is actually going to take you. Or you can then actually just go Google, say, hey, FTC phishing scams, and one of the results should pop up with this specific resource link. So moving on, I'm going to hand this over to Chris.
It's a very impressive segue.
Thank you.
Dad joke moved in there quick.
It did. I hope you guys caught it because I'm very proud of it.
If not, you can watch it on the recording.
Right, exactly.
All right. So I'm going to cover a few things very briefly as well for the tail end of the webcast here. I'm going to be talking about virtual private networks, VPNs. Going to be talking about passwords and some protections and stuff against there. And if we have time, we'll mention a very small thing about looking for that S on the end of HTTP to make sure that the site is secure for you to submit credentials to. So first up, virtual private networks here. You see this a lot from VPNs, and you see it a lot from vendors of VPNs, mostly when they sponsor YouTube videos or you've got tech articles or blogs and things like that. You'll see these ads pop up and they present it. I know it's not a promise by the sales team, but they do present it in a sneaky way, claiming that VPNs are the end-all solution to cybersecurity for individuals. You're being tracked online, so use a VPN and you'll be fine, right? And that is, to quote Dwight Schrute, is just false, right? They do provide some protection in certain scenarios and in certain capacities, but it's important to kind of know the difference. And I've gotten this question from family members in the past as well. It's, should I be using a VPN? Should I pay for this service? And my answer is always, what are you doing? Right? So what are you trying to use the VPN for? And they just say, well, I want to be anonymous online. And I try to counsel them, the VPN does not provide anonymity. It just switches who sees who you are. So we jump to the next slide, Ashley. So there are two main types of VPNs that we're basically going to talk about here and their uses to try to get a sense of it. And there's a generic remote access VPN, which what that would mean to an individual would be as a private citizen and individual, not in your work capacity, would mean that you're trying to connect to your private network from a remote location. So if you're trying to connect back into your home network to gain access to certain resources or devices that exist in your home network, and you are not at home, right? So that you're trying to tunnel right back in home. And I have a couple little diagram that might show this a little bit better. And then for corporate use as to a remote access VPN, it's an employee like me at Black Hills trying to access a corporate network and some resources that are only available someplace out in South Dakota or wherever those might be. And that could be a cloud hosting provider, it could be an actual server rack, doesn't matter. But I am, as an employee, trying to gain access to otherwise inaccessible corporate networks. We do that a lot of times when we're doing remote testing for organizations. We may VPN into their network and then do an internal network pen test. But those are two individual types of uses. A site-to-site VPN, which is just to mention very briefly here, is more on the organization level of things when they're trying to basically bridge two networks together to make it seem like it is one network and make it all accessible from within there. That's not really a use case. And I mention it to say, unless you are in an organization and you are setting something up, you do not have to worry about site-to-site VPNs whatsoever. So really what you need to be concerned with is this very first, or I guess second bullet point of individual use, since we're talking about security basics for an individual to protect yourself. You jump to the next slide there, Ashley. So what does this kind of look like? And to use an analogy or a metaphor or synonym, I don't know, whatever the right grammatical term is to use for that, I usually associate VPNs are like a subway, right? You as a person can get on at any subway stop, right? You can get on at any station. And then once you're within that subway, you're going through a tunnel with a bunch of other people, right? And that VPN provider or that tunnel is managed by the subway, right? And you can get off at any stop along the way to your site or your site/website or location, geographic location as an actual subway, and you go about your merry way. But what do you do to board a subway usually if you are paying to access it, right? You have a little Metro card or something. Speaking of someone who's never lived in a city with a subway, but I have visited some. You purchase a Metro card that you refill with money or points or credits or whatever, and you scan that to get through the turnstiles. The subway knows it's you. The subway knows you're entering. The subway management system, being a VPN provider, a product provider, will know it's you connecting, and it is basically ferrying you to a location. Once you exit that, they have security cameras, they're watching, they know that you got off there, and you can exit and leave and go to anywhere from that point. But imagine that that station you get off on is your website you're trying to reach. You may have hidden from the website that it's you directly, but the VPN knows it's you. The VPN vendor or provider knows that you went there and has that information because they have to ferry all the data right back to you through the same tunnel. They have to be able to associate a user, an authenticated user for their systems, and where they're going and what they're accessing. Some VPN providers say they scrub that data. Some VPN providers hold on to a certain amount of time. The point is that you're not hiding you, you're just changing who knows, right? And even if you're still going to that site, if that site's using tracking cookies or anything like that, your browser is still getting those tracking cookies, and they're still going to be able to track you unless you're disallowing tracking cookies, disabling all those features and things like that. So VPN, to be clear, it doesn't hide you at all. It just changes the party that knows where you're going, right? Where I think the next slide might show it a little bit better. So the basic usage of a VPN for an individual where it makes sense, and this is 95% of the population. These are my numbers, not from anywhere. It's just what I assume, right? From people I interact with, is if you are on a public network, if you're on a hotel network, Wi-Fi network, or you're on a coffee shop network or airport network or anything like that, something where you and anybody else who's around you can join, and you have no idea who's managing that network. If you're on that for Wi-Fi, use a VPN because that obscures you from view inside of that net, basically. Your traffic is then encrypted and it's tunneling out to a VPN provider. You could set up your own VPN at home to accomplish this as well, so that you can tunnel through your home network and go back out. Um, the other scenario here is if you are just basically traveling. If you're overseas in countries where you don't trust them, you're overseas traveling, period. Using a VPN is great because different laws apply to internet service providers and governments for what they can view and see based on where you are traveling. So I always recommend, if you're going overseas anywhere, unless you want to become an expert in their laws for what they can track and not, I recommend using a VPN. If you are not somebody who joins public networks, if you're not someone who travels frequently, then a VPN is probably not for you. The advanced column over here, if you are using those techniques and those bullets, then you know why you should be. To take advantage of added security, of DNS black holing, accessing remote systems, or connecting to geo-restricted content, that's like 5% of the population, right? That's not our big hit. So if you're traveling or you're using public networks often, or at all really, I recommend a VPN. You can jump to the next slide. This is a little terrible. Tried to make it as simple as possible graphic for flow here. Top one being no VPN at all. Your traffic is basically viewable to some degree. I don't have to get into the whole stack of what's viewable and what's not, but your traffic is somewhat viewable to your internet service provider. So imagine you're at home in that very top row right there, and you're just navigating to a website. Your internet service provider has some knowledge of what you're doing. If you were to use a vendor product VPN, like that middle row, you're just sending your traffic to the vendor, to that VPN server, and then they're forwarding on to a different internet service provider. So you're still being tracked by some party between you and the website. Your activities are still known. They're not obscured. The third option at the bottom there is that home VPN. You set up a home VPN server at your house, and this is the best one, like using Pi VPN or any number of other VPNs you can set up at home with some networking equipment, is that if you're out away from your house, traveling overseas, or you're on a cell network, or you're traveling to you're on a different public Wi-Fi, you can use a home VPN server to then get back to what I will say trusted ISP, and funneling it back through there, so that if you're overseas or anything like that, using a home VPN will make sure that your traffic then has a origination point and has every network hop along the way as if you were from your house. And that is a good bit of security to have. You can jump to the next slide, Ashley. I apologize. We have about 6 minutes left here, so I'm going to hit passwords, and we'll take questions at the end for these couple last sections here. So passwords, you put your fingers over your ear if you want. And a lot of family members, a lot of people that you talk to, and I harp on this a little bit, I hate the conversation of passwords, but they are super important because they do guard your accounts online. Now, the most important thing for a password is length. Right? It makes it difficult to guess. It makes it difficult to crack. It makes it difficult to do a lot of things for attacks. The more complex the password, meaning the different types of characters, this is where you get into when you create a password and they say it has to have a few special characters, a few numbers, things like that. The more complex, the better. And completely randomized password is best, meaning that there is no form or factor or structure to it. It is a jumble of random characters as long as possible. And that makes it extremely hard for an attack to be pulled off. It makes it extremely hard to crack. It makes it extremely hard to guess. The fourth most important thing with passwords is not to reuse passwords between online services. Don't use your same password for Facebook as you do for Netflix, as you do for Disney Plus, as you do for all these other things. Because if one of those services gets breached, that common password can be reused. And they may be under no legal or financial obligation to reimburse you for any loss. So if, let's say, Netflix gets breached, not that they will, I'm sure they have great security measures. Let's say they get breached, but you use the same username and password for your bank account. All the attacker would have to do is do a tactic called credential stuffing and take that username and password pair and try it against every financial institution and see which one works. And that would be really, really bad. You can jump to the next slide, Ashley. Oh. So the big problems is everyone says I can't remember dozens of different passwords. And that's right. It's really hard. And it's hard to come up with unique ones for everyone, for every type of service you're doing. And don't worry, you're absolutely not alone in this regard. That's why, let's say there's much better things that you could remember for passwords, like birthdays or anniversaries of your families, or for Star Wars facts and theories and things like that, that you really need that brain space for. But this is a common problem, so common that it has been solved in the industry with the very next slide, something called a password manager. So the solution is using, and this graphic was really weird. All these graphics were ChatGPT DALL-E created, and I fed it a one ring to rule them all, but make it password based. And this is the weird graphic it came up with. But a password manager basically does exactly what the name implies. It manages your passwords for you so that you don't have to remember them. How do you access that password manager? Is by keeping track of one really good password, one that you can remember. If you can remember that one password, your master password, you can access all of the others. Now, that's not only the ability to manage your passwords and lock them and secure them with one single password that only you should know. It can also help you generate secure long passwords that are completely unique for every different service. So if you jump to the next slide there, Ashley, there are several types of password managers out there. Most common and easily accessible one is a browser-based password. Chrome and Firefox, they offer to remember your passwords when you enter them into a login field. This is good because it's simple and it's side of a browser password manager is that it's only accessible from that, right? Unless you have associated an account along with it. I just got a little pop-up warning saying my internet connection is unstable. So hopefully
You're fine. I can hear you.
Okay, great. The only problem there is unless you also associate that browser with a, say, Firefox account or Google account or something like that, those passwords are just sitting on that browser. Online
Also,
password
they're managers dumpable. I was going to say also they're dumpable too if that computer is compromised.
If somebody is able to get access to your browser, they can dump those credentials as well. So online password manager is a good middle ground. There are several vendors out there. The pros of those is that they have browser plugins where they can still fill in authentication forms in a browser. They are accessible from anywhere, including your phone, and you can use them to fill in logins on your mobile apps as well as websites on browser. The downside is that you're trusting that third party not to be breached. And I'm not trying to throw anybody under the bus. But LastPass was breached once or twice in the last couple of years, and with varying information being dumped, and the attackers have access to sort of things. So you are trusting them to be secure, like any of the other services you sign up for. The most secure option is offline. There are several things on there. You encrypt it yourself. You still use a master password. The great pro of it is you have full control. The con of it is you have full control. If you lose it, if you forget that master password, that's it. That whole password database is gone and inaccessible to you. You can jump to the next slide, Ashley. So real quick, when to update passwords is if you're setting up a new device on your network or anything that you purchase from a store that has a default password, for routers, cameras, any other Internet of Thing devices, change your passwords then. If there's a breach with your vendor or provider, change it then, or even the service for that password. Like if Facebook got breached, you want to change, rotate that password. And big one here, when you're joining a company, because the worst thing, not worst thing, I suppose, but if you're doing a pen test and you say, change me, with an exclamation point and a 1 or something like that is the default password when they onboard you and you don't change it, guess what one of the passwords we probably will be guessing is. And just to make sure we have nothing else after this for passwords, I think there's a slide for MFA, but Jason, I don't want to take up too much time. The basic is something is better than nothing when it comes to MFAs. Text message is better than nothing. Email is better than nothing. Authenticator apps are fantastic. YubiKeys or physical devices for people who are a little bit more adept to MFAs, those are amazing. I think that's the end of the password stuff. We won't have time. There's some resources and links there. We won't have time for this last bit here. Oh, and a little note at the end. Actually, I just left yours blank because I didn't know what to write. I have 2 training classes, like I mentioned at the beginning of the class. I have an advanced offensive tooling class. There's some dates there of when it's upcoming. And I have an intro to offensive tooling class that's available on demand. I'll just drop those links in the Discord here. Jason, welcome back.
Yeah.
We definitely didn't talk badly about you when you were on.
Yeah, no, I can hear everything backstage.
Not at all.
Yeah. All right. So thank you, first of all, Ashley and Chris. We appreciate you sharing your knowledge. And really the main takeaway today was here's some of the things to talk to your family, friends, coworkers, and other people about who need to protect themselves. Because most likely we're talking to the choir here for most people of like, here's how to secure yourself. Sometimes you don't know what things to talk to your family about until you actually have some kind of framework to talk to your family about. And sometimes they don't care.
Or if you're like me, hi mom, hi. She loves to come to me for help.
Yeah.
And cyber security, IT support.
So
yeah,
we know that some of you need to go. So what I'm going to do is Ashley, I'm going to have you give your final thoughts. Chris, give your final thoughts, and then we're going to stick around for some Q&A if you have time for that. So Ashley, what are your final thoughts? If you could sum up everything today in just one final thought, what would it be?
Don't trust anything.
Don't trust anything. Good.
Don't be cynical.
Yeah.
That was the.
I'm sorry, Jason. I broke the rule.
Oh no.
Okay. Hold on. No.
I
I'll
also
go back.
don't trust
I'll go
anything,
back.
so that's fine.
Trust, but verify.
There you go.
Okay, Chris, you could sum up everything today.
Doing something is better than nothing at all. So if you don't do all of the things we talked about, that's fine. Doing something to protect yourself additionally than just openly accessing the internet and wildly using it. Doing anything is better than nothing. So do try to protect yourself. Be wary, as Ashley said. I have had close friends or family that fell victim to scams that financially ruined them and have done things that are not easily recoverable from. And anything you can do to protect yourself by being wary or using a technology is a good thing.
All right, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today for this Black Hills Information Security webcast. Hopefully you have a framework to be able to talk to your friends, family, coworkers, and others about security and protecting themselves online. Because here's who just told you the advice. People who break into computers and people's accounts all day long. Like they're constantly doing the thing that they're trying to protect you from. And so if anyone's going to be able to talk to you about actually how to break into stuff, it's the people who break into stuff. All right. So with that, we're going to do some Q&A and we're going to finish the webcast. If you need to leave, totally understand. All right. We're done. All right. So I want to talk about something real quick because I recently had a chance to talk to my family about this because there's so many videos of me online. There's so many things of me talking. So it's super easy to clone me.
Look at me.
Thanks,
Sorry.
Ashley. But it's so easy to clone my voice. And so I reached out to all my family and I was like, hey, we're going to use code words if we ever need to talk about anything that's serious or financial in any way.
Mm-hmm.
And they were like, why? And I was like, okay, so let me explain. Yeah.
Because Jason is so much of a public figure.
Yes.
Jason's code word is kiddie pool.
Yeah. So for those of you that are also public and you make videos and you put things out there, you are giving people the opportunity to clone you and your voice. So we use code words. And then lastly, before I turn it over to questions for you, my family was like, this is really inconvenient. They said that. They're like, this long password feels inconvenient. MFA feels inconvenient. And I was like, you're right. It is inconvenient. And what you're doing is creating an inconvenience for the attackers. And so if it's inconvenient to you, it's even more inconvenient to them because they're not you, and so it's going to make their lives harder. Okay.
Yeah. So I have two things. I saw a question in there, Jason, I want to answer real quick for everybody, easier than typing for me. And then I have a thought about what you just said as well. So one of the questions was the classes I posted in there for my two classes, do they require some background? The intro class assumes no knowledge of offensive tooling whatsoever. I keep it high level and basic. And the advanced class, I assume some knowledge of how networks and web applications work and how Active Directory works. So there's some, but I don't require much. Neither one is a prerequisite to the other. And for what Jason mentioned of saying, family members saying this is too much of an inconvenience, I've told this story before, and I'm in my classes, and I'm going to tell it again now. Is back in 2019, Disney Plus launched, and I set up an account, and you can set up profiles under it. So I shared my credentials with my family members and set up profiles so that they could access it from their place. This is before the days of like stopping that you could access things unless you're from one location. And I sent the password to my brother, and he came back and said, "That's ridiculous. What is that?" I said, "That's 20 characters random and isn't used on any of my other accounts. Don't share it with people. Access it that way." And he says, "I'm not doing that." Disney Plus launched November 12th, 2019. Within 5 days, there were hundreds or thousands of Disney Plus accounts compromised because of using credential stuffing as the attack. Credentials that were breached elsewhere, reused username and passwords from other services online. The attackers just plugged those into Disney Plus and accessed it. And at the time, I'm not sure if I don't even think they have it now. There was no option for MFA on Disney Plus, I believe. So they just username and password correct, you write in. And they were just accessing accounts that way, changing plans and all that. So there's a little story and note on that thing. I found an old article about it. And this was literally 5 years ago. And this is still a thing today. Half a decade, and this stuff still happens.
I just found the section on Discord where people can send you friend requests, and I forgot that it existed.
How many do you have?
It's a lot.
A lot.
Thank you.
Because I'm so pretty.
Because Jason's so popular.
Yes.
So,
Code word.
Is one for me?
No wonder. One's for
I've
me.
been waiting
I know. Yeah.
all these years. 2.5
years, Deb. 2.5 years I've been waiting.
Please accept my friend request.
so we passed by the
Gosh.
YubiKey booth at RSA, and I was like, "Hey, John, remember when we had that bypassing the YubiKey, or like, what was it?
Yeah. I was weaponizing
Weaponizing the YubiKey."
the YubiKey. Yeah,
And he like turns to me and is like, "Yeah, they weren't real happy about that." And I was like, I could see why.
Oh, I just saw another mention here, and I'm sorry I didn't mention it during the password part. But for a lot of those online password managers, you can share your credentials with different users. So I have a whole section of passwords that are shared with my wife that she can access, and a whole bunch of stuff that is work related that doesn't matter to her, but our bank account information. You can store secrets in there that require re-entering of master passwords as well. So you can, if you want to, store like social security numbers, things like that, stuff that you need that are critical, that if something happens to you, your family can continue. And let me tell you that from hard lessons learned, making sure your family can continue if something happens to you and continue quickly and easily is one of the best things you can do for them.
There's also an option if you have an iPhone. That I believe it's set up in like your emergency section. I can follow up with a post on how to actually do it, but there is a in case of death section of your iPhone to give access to other people to your phone and to everything that is hosted in your phone, like your passwords, for example, if you use iPhone keychain, things like that.
That's really good. I didn't know that they had that for the iPhone.
Yes, they do.
We all learned something here today.
There is a question that I wanted to address really quick before more people jump off.
Go.
Oh my gosh. Someone said in lieu of Norton, etc., what would you recommend for free identity protection? And personally, I wouldn't. I don't think there's a great one size fits all solution for quote identity protection. What you're paying for when you're paying for those things is for someone to say, hey, your data showed up in a data breach. Great, fantastic. When has my data not shown up in a data breach? I think the better solution is to tackling the other side of that problem. Freeze your credit. There really is no reason to not have your credit frozen at any time. You can still apply for things with frozen credit. It just adds another layer of protection. They have to call you and verify your identity, and before they can approve, loan applications or things like that. You can unfreeze your credit very easily if you're going to be applying for something. So my advice there is freeze your credit, and don't ever unfreeze it. I don't think my credit has ever been unfrozen in the past, 10 years since I've learned about freezing your credit. So that would be my advice there. I do think that we also have a blog post about removing your personal data from the internet. Am I wrong?
Not sure.
We have one about getting yourself or not using Google and like removing.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking.
From your life. That's when you're thinking of Mike Felton.
So
maybe, yes.
Along those lines,
Joseph
actually,
was working on something too.
And so everybody knows. There is a completely different method to securing what is called basically deposit accounts than it is to freeze your credit. I'm going to put the link in here. You can basically set up alerting. It's checks systems. You could set up alerting or freezing. And this is important. I'm a security professional. I do pen testing. I talk about all of these basic things for security. I had a savings and a checking account opened using my social security number with a bank that operates in Canada and the US. And the only reason I discovered it is because the attacker forgot to set up online statements. So I got a paper statement in the mail, and then I started asking. And it turns out that even though my credit's frozen or set on monitoring, you need to do something completely different to freeze what is called deposit accounts. So checkings and savings can be open. And I found out through this bank in a very tense conversation with their representative that it takes almost nothing to open these things, no second verification. But to close them, it requires months, police reports, verifications of photo identifications, all sorts of things that you would think would be required to open an account in the first damn place. But I swore I didn't keep it fully PG.
Yes.
You get one.
Yes. And so someone else asked recommendations for AV antivirus on Linux. Claim AV and the other offering for Mac will both work on Linux as well, since Mac is Unix based.
All right.
Let's see what else is here.
There were a bunch of Q&A questions, but some of them were just
that's what I'm looking
comments.
through right now. Yeah.
Somebody said Ashley and Chris deserve raises.
Yeah, that was weird. That was weird. I just deleted it.
No, I should just dismiss that one.
Yeah.
Was that from Ashley?
It's probably from my mother.
I don't know.
Oh, that would make sense.
That makes sense.
Okay.
You have the power to make that happen.
Yes, someone had said fire both of these terrible people.
Ooh. Chris, here's one for you. Yeah, okay. I'm just going to ignore Jason. How do you know if a VPN is good? How do you vet a VPN solution?
Ooh, that's a tough one. There's so many that are out there now. And first thing you could do is just search for that VPN's name in Google and click the little news icon and try to or news link and try to ignore all the stuff that's from their domain and look for news articles about. Because it was found out, and I don't remember exactly which one, but it was found out that one VPN provider who promised that they did not keep any information about the traffic between authenticated users, they removed it immediately. It was discovered that they don't actually do that. they actually just keep it. They put it in a different system into a database, and they do some sort of heuristic data off of that stuff. And you'll find out that even VPN providers and ISPs, that's why I mentioned in the webcast overseas being a lot of different laws, that a lot of them are required by governments to maintain records for a certain period of time, sort of like how your doctor is required to maintain paper record of your history going at least 5 or 7 years back of visiting them. Because if the government ever decides that we need to prosecute this person for any reason or search for their online activity, they can go to all of these ISPs in your area or go to all the VPN providers that are within their purview and say, I want everything that came from this IP address, and they can get it. So vetting different ones is a really tough one, which is why I don't use any of them. I have my own home server VPN that I set up with using Ubiquiti Unify gateway. And whenever I'm out of town or I'm traveling or anything like that, I tunnel right back into my home network, and I use that as the egress for all of my traffic. And that way I don't have to worry about it. So if you worry about which one to use as a vendor, it can be very tough to figure out which one's good and which one's bad. So doing it yourself is always best. There's a little bit of legwork, but I gotta say, setting it up on the Unify gateway was a breeze. It was super easy.
This reminds me of like the person who's like, so you can set up your own email server, but like don't.
Yeah, you can, but don't do that.
Yeah.
No.
So is setting up your own VPN similar? Like, go ahead.
So
but don't.
I do have, somebody also asked to have a guide for setting up a home VPN. I do have a write-up somewhere. I'll try to find it.
Oh,
That's old on Twitter.
okay.
That is, and it may be slightly outdated, so as a warning, I'll try to find the post and reply to it. But
could
it
Well,
was,
so I was
definitely-
saying we should do an updated webinar,
Yeah, you should
Yeah.
update that.
Chris.
I
it
highly
is,
recommend it.
it's a guide of setting up PyVPN on a home network that uses a Google router as your main thing. So it covers, it has some steps around doing port forwarding for your router and things like that. Very basic. Like I said, it may be outdated. So I'll look for that and reply in Discord. But setting up, like I mentioned, setting up a home VPN, if your router or your gateway for your house that you get has it as a feature, it's really easy. And they have great documentation for that. The Unify UDM Pro thing that I use, it's pricey. I think the thing itself is like $500, $400, $500.
Okay.
So,
Well, everybody, we're going to wrap it up today. And I'm going to do one last thing. If you're currently job hunting, like you are currently job hunting, either you feel stuck in the job that you're in or you want to make a career change or something like that, please put the word hunter into the Discord chat. If you're like, but I'm not on Discord. Well, Discord is where we can actually do something. And so if you're a hunter, please put the word hunter in there. We'll make sure that you have the job hunter role inside Discord. And on Tuesdays at 10 a.m. when I am not traveling, I do a job hunting live stream to help people find jobs. And we're currently
Someone said job it.
Job it.
we're currently at 238 people that have found jobs since the beginning that have come back to let us know. All right. Deb, you got any final thoughts? Yeah. Deb, what are your final thoughts?
I trust no one. I like Ashley's. Or trust but verify. And also, thanks for joining us, guys. We show up every Thursday. It, for us, is one of the best parts of our week. We love hanging out with you. And we love when you interact and say hi. And so, yeah, keep coming back. We love you guys.
All right. And with that, Ryan and Yuri, kill it with fire. Ryan or Yuri, kill it. Kill it with fire, you guys.
One job.
All right, kill it.